remember when he ran for the city commission, I remember he asked my father to be his campaign manager, and which was really exciting if you think about it, especially in that era, because you had, this really proud Cuban and this really proud African-American pastor who became like brothers.
A lot of people knew him as priest, but I affectionately knew him as uncle. That's what we called him. A lot of people thought he was a very stern person. I knew him as a very passionate, loving, kind-hearted person. Believe it or not, there was a soft side to him that nobody knew except maybe his relatives, especially his nieces. He taught us to be strong, disciplined, do the right thing, and most of all, education was his top priority.
He was appointed by the City Commission and then ran for re-election on 2 occasions. So in addition to his work in the church, he was also what Mayor Ferrer used to always say, a statesman. He hated for me to say that he was a politician, but he was a statesman. And so we talk about Theodore Gibson not only as a priest, but as a statesman and a man who worked to improve conditions in the greater Miami area.
Dad was always coming home, with different stories. That's where he's told us that the philosophies of Reverend Gibson were the right ones in trying to build bridges amongst different communities, because really we're all one community, but each one has its own identity, and they're all beautiful. And I think that Reverend Gibson might have been a real advocate, but he was still a gentle person. And I think that above all, his intelligence and his brilliance, but his heart, his understanding, his wisdom, you've got to be a leader, especially think about it in those days, because we had such less understanding about each other. Today we have more understanding. We still have a long way to go to learn about each other, but in those days there was much more isolation. And so for him to be able to bring communities together through discussion, through dialogue, you had to put aside criticism. Harsh words don't bring communities together. Kind words, insightful words, wise words, his words brought people together.
Well, we're talking about another era and another time, and it was a different Miami, not only because of the racial and ethnic composition of the community. It was the worldview and how we approach problems. Theodore Gibson was from the old school, and I think that quality that came through in his words, in his actions, conviction, dedication, principle, came through in the things that the city of Miami was doing. He also had a bad temper once in a while, and that was. And that had its effects also, in a positive way. What Theodore Gibson was able to do was, in a changing Miami, because by the beginning of the 80s, Miami was beginning to change. He saw the change, and he was able to deal with it in a compassionate way, bridging across. He was a community builder. He knew how to build bridges.
Father Gibson's love for the community, I think, is seen most profoundly when you understand that he was a bridge builder.
Some of the things I remember about Father was that he was very outspoken and he was dedicated.
Whenever my uncle integrated any establishment, he would always take his nieces. And the irony of this story is we was not accustomed to eating a lot of different foods. So he would always say, don't say you're not going to eat that. How do you know you don't like it? You never tried it, so try it. And whenever we would go to a restaurant, he says, why don't I order for you?
We lived in the same neighborhood over time. He lived on 6th Court and 21st Street, and I lived on 19th Street and 5th Place. And we interacted mostly over at St. Agnes Church because we were both in the Acolyte Guild. And I was about 12 when Father Gibson was about 16. And I knew right then there was something different about him because we used to go and play football in the church grounds in the evenings, and naturally we would create quite a commotion. And the priest, who was Father Comer at the time, would take it as long as he could before he came out to chase us away. And we would all gather up our things and leave, but Gibson didn't want to go. He said, well, look, this is our church, and we got a right to be here. We might be a little loud, but we're having some clean fun.
Mm-hmm.
And he would argue with the priest about our being there making noise. And I said, well, we were all much younger, and I said, no, my daddy would kill me if he found out I was taking issue with the priest, because in those days the priest was the boss, you know. But Gibson didn't mind about that. He wanted to establish his right for the boys to play football after school. And growing up, Gibson was the same kind. He never changed. Theodore never changed. He was always into something. If it wasn't right, he had to contest it. And he was a person who believed that nobody with the right cause should not have a forum.